Captain Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cold metal of the observation deck's window, watching the swirling nebula beyond. The Terran Defense Fleet's flagship, Defiance, cut through space like a silver blade, its hull scarred from countless battles. Behind them, a convoy of human vessels stretched across the darkness, carrying refugees from the outer colonies. The bridge doors hissed open, and Commander Jake Morrison approached with hurried steps. His weathered face bore the weight of bad news. "Captain, we've received another transmission from the Elder Council. They're ordering us to retreat to the inner systems immediately." Sarah turned from the window, her jaw set with determination. "The same message they've been broadcasting for 3 months?" "Identical. They claim the Vorthak swarm has grown beyond our ability to contain. The Council estimates our fleet strength at 60% of what would be required for victory." Morrison handed her a data pad. "They're recommending we abandon the outer rim entirely." The captain's eyes scanned the holographic display showing fleet positions. 47 human ships against an estimated 2,000 Vorthak vessels. The numbers painted a grim picture, but Sarah had learned not to trust Elder mathematics when it came to human capabilities. "What about the civilians on Kepler 7? She asked, knowing the answer would only fuel her anger. "The Elders classify them as acceptable losses. They say saving the core worlds takes priority." Morrison's voice carried barely contained disgust. 15 million people, Sarah. Men, women, children who trusted us to protect them. The Elders had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years. Ancient beings of immense psychic power, they had brought peace between countless species through careful diplomacy and overwhelming mental influence. When humanity first ventured beyond their solar system 50 years ago, the Elders had welcomed them as junior partners in their vast galactic community. But humanity had always been different. While other species readily accepted Elder guidance, humans questioned everything. They modified Elder technology, improved upon ancient designs, and worst of all, they refused to submit completely to psychic influence. The Elders tolerated this rebellious nature because humans proved useful as soldiers and explorers, venturing into dangerous regions other species avoided. The Vorthak swarm had emerged from dark space 3 years ago. A hive-minded insectoid race, they consumed everything in their path, converting organic matter into more warriors for their endless fleet. The Elders had tried their usual diplomatic approach, attempting to communicate with the swarm's collective consciousness. The response had been the complete annihilation of the Centauri system. Since then, the war had raged across the outer rim. The Elders commanded vast fleets, but their ancient tactics proved ineffective against an enemy that felt no fear and acknowledged no surrender. Species after species fell back toward the galactic core, abandoning their frontier worlds to save what they could. Only humanity continued to fight. "Captain," Morrison said quietly, "the crew is asking questions. They want to know why we're ignoring direct orders from the galactic government." Sarah moved to the tactical display, studying the swirling mass of red dots representing the approaching Vorthak fleet. "Because those orders condemn innocent people to death. The Elders see numbers on a screen. We see faces, families, hopes, and dreams." The bridge crew worked quietly around them, but Sarah knew they were listening. These men and women had followed her through 18 major engagements, watching her make impossible decisions under unbearable pressure. They trusted her judgment, but that trust had limits. "The Elders have fought wars for millennia," Morrison continued. "Their battle computers process more variables than our entire fleet combined. Maybe they know something we don't." "Or maybe," Sarah said, turning to face her old friend, "they've forgotten what it means to fight for something besides cold strategic advantage." The communication array crackled to life, and Lieutenant Torres called out from her station. "Captain, incoming transmission from Admiral Fletcher aboard the Determination. High priority." "Put him through." Admiral Fletcher's grizzled face appeared on the main screen, his eyes hard as steel. Behind him, the bridge of the Determination buzzed with activity. Sarah, I've just received word from Earth Command. The President is backing our operation, but unofficially only. If this goes badly, we're on our own. Understood, Admiral. What's our tactical situation? Grim but not hopeless. The Vorthak main force will reach Kepler-7 in 36 hours. Our scout reports suggest they're moving in the standard swarm formation, relying on overwhelming numbers rather than tactical sophistication. Sarah nodded. The Vorthak had evolved as a single organism spanning billions of individual units. They thought as one mind, which gave them perfect coordination, but also made them predictable. Any word from the evacuation teams? Transport ships are loading civilians as fast as they can, but they need at least 48 hours to clear the planet. That means we have to buy them 12 hours we don't have. The mathematics were brutal but simple. 47 human ships against 2,000 Vorthak vessels. Even with superior technology and training, the odds approached impossibility. But Sarah had learned something during her years of fighting the swarm that the Elders' battle computers couldn't quantify. Desperation made humans dangerous. Admiral, I have an idea. It's insane, possibly suicidal, but it might work. She gestured to the tactical display. The Vorthak are approaching through the Meridian asteroid belt. If we could create a choke point... Fletcher's eyes lit up with understanding. A killing field. Force them into a narrow corridor where their numbers become a disadvantage. He paused, considering. It would require perfect timing and incredible luck. Since when have those been problems for humanity? The Admiral's weathered face cracked into a smile. Never, Captain. Never. Begin preparations immediately. We'll show these Elders what human determination looks like. As the communication ended, Sarah turned to address her bridge crew. These young faces looked up at her with a mixture of fear and absolute trust. They were about to ask them to fight impossible odds for people they'd never met, and somehow she knew they would follow her into hell itself. You've all heard the situation, she began. The Elders want us to run. Command wants plausible deniability. The Vorthak want to feast on human flesh. But 15 million civilians on Kepler-7 want to go home to their families. She moved among them, making eye contact with each crew member. I won't lie to you. Our chances aren't good. The smart play is to retreat and save our ships for another day. But sometimes being smart isn't enough. Sometimes you have to be human. Lieutenant Torres stood first, her hand moving to her heart. I'm with you, Captain. One by one, the entire bridge crew rose to their feet. No words were spoken, but their commitment filled the air like electricity. Then let's show the galaxy what happens when you underestimate humanity, Sarah said. All stations prepare for battle. It's time to prove that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the odds. The Defiance began its turn toward the Meridian asteroid belt, followed by the rest of the human fleet. Behind them, the refugee convoy continued its desperate journey toward safety. Ahead lay the most important battle of the war, where a handful of human ships would stand against the darkness and refuse to yield. The Elders had calculated the probabilities and found them wanting. But their ancient computers had never learned to factor in the one variable that made humanity truly dangerous: the absolute refusal to abandon those who depended on them, regardless of the cost. Sarah Chen looked out at the stars and smiled grimly. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had survived every extinction event their homeworld could throw at them. They didn't fight to win. They fought because surrender meant letting evil triumph over innocence. And that was something humanity would never accept. The asteroid field stretched across space like a graveyard of broken worlds, chunks of rock and metal spinning silently in the void. Captain Sarah Chen studied the tactical display, watching her fleet take position among the larger asteroids. 47 human ships against an incoming tide of alien death. Mining charges are in position. reported Commander Morrison. Chief Warrant Officer Kim's team worked miracles getting the explosives placed so quickly. Sarah nodded, watching the glowing dots that represented thousands of high-yield charges now hidden throughout the asteroid field. What about the modifications to our weapon systems? Complete. Every ship in the fleet has had their plasma cannons recalibrated. The engineers aren't happy about what we're asking them to do, but they've made it work. Morrison paused. Captain, are you certain about this plan? We're essentially turning our own weapons into bombs. The plan was desperate, born from human ingenuity and the willingness to take risks that would horrify more cautious species. Instead of fighting the Vorthak in open space where their numbers would overwhelm human firepower, they would lure the enemy into the asteroid field and turn the environment itself into a weapon. The Vorthak think like a hive mind, Sarah explained, pointing to the strategic display. They see us hiding among the asteroids and assume we're setting up a defensive position. They'll charge straight through, trying to overwhelm us with massed firepower. And when they're packed tightly together in the narrow corridors between the asteroids, we detonate everything at once. The mining charges will shatter the larger rocks into millions of projectiles, and the overloaded plasma cannons will create directed energy bursts that channel through the debris field like lightning through a conductor. It was a plan that required split-second timing and perfect coordination. One mistake, one delayed signal, and the human fleet would be caught in their own trap. But Sarah had learned something about her species during years of fighting impossible odds. Humans had an uncanny ability to make desperate plans work through sheer determination. The communication array buzzed, and Lieutenant Torres looked up from her station. Captain, transmission from the evacuation fleet. They're requesting an additional 6 hours to complete civilian loading. Sarah's heart sank. 6 more hours meant the difference between a fighting retreat and a massacre. Tell them we'll do what we can. Across the asteroid field, her ships waited in silence. The crews knew the odds, understood the risks, but they had volunteered anyway. That was perhaps humanity's greatest strength. The ability to choose sacrifice over self-preservation when principles demanded it. Contact from Admiral Fletcher, Torres announced. The Admiral's face appeared on screen, his expression grim but determined. Sarah, our long-range sensors are picking up the Vorthak advance guard. 24 vessels moving fast through the outer system. Scouts, Sarah realized. They're checking for ambushes before committing the main force. Exactly. If we engage them, we lose the element of surprise. If we don't, they might detect our preparations. Sarah considered their options. The Vorthak scouts were fast, heavily armed, and would certainly report any unusual activity. But letting them discover the hidden mining charges would doom the entire operation. Admiral, how long until the main Vorthak force arrives? 18 hours, assuming they maintain current speed. And the scouts will reach our position in 3 hours. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. 3 hours to deal with 24 enemy scouts without revealing their presence to the main force. It seemed impossible, but humans had made careers out of achieving the impossible. Admiral, I have an idea. What if we don't hide from the scouts? What if we give them exactly what they expect to see? Fletcher's eyebrows rose. You want to reveal our position? Not our real position, our apparent position. Sarah called up a tactical overlay, highlighting a section of open space beyond the asteroid field. We send a small force to engage the scouts there, making it look like we're preparing a standard fleet action. Meanwhile, the main force stays hidden. A deception operation. But if the scouts escape to report to the main force, they won't escape. We'll use volunteer ships, skeleton crews, and everything we've learned about Vorthak tactics to ensure complete elimination of their scouts. It means sacrificing ships we can't spare, but it preserves the surprise we need for the main battle. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Sarah was asking for volunteers to fly into certain death, drawing enemy fire while the rest of the fleet remained hidden. It was the kind of desperate gamble that had characterized human warfare since the species first picked up rocks and decided to fight predators 10 times their size. "Captain," Morrison said quietly, "I volunteer for the decoy force." "As do I," added Lieutenant Torres. One by one, voices around the bridge offered their ships and lives for the mission. Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. These people understood the mathematics of sacrifice, the cold calculation that some must die so others might live. "Thank you," she said simply, "but I need my senior staff here for the main battle. This mission goes to our most experienced squadron leaders." Within an hour, 12 human ships had separated from the main fleet, moving to intercept the Vorthak scouts in open space. Each vessel carried a volunteer crew of 30, men and women who had looked death in the face and chosen duty over self-preservation. Commander Lisa Park led the decoy force aboard the cruiser Valiant. She was 32 years old, a graduate of the Mars Naval Academy, and had been scheduled to rotate back to Earth for her wedding in 3 months. Now she guided her small fleet toward an engagement she knew none of them would survive. "All ships. This is Valiant Leader." Her voice crackled over the communication channel. "Remember, we're not trying to win this fight. We're selling a story. Make it look like a standard engagement, draw them in close, and when they think they have us beaten, we detonate our reactors simultaneously." The human ships took position near a small moon, arranging themselves in the defensive formation the Vorthak had learned to expect. Hidden among the asteroids, Sarah watched the tactical display with growing tension. Everything depended on the enemy believing this was humanity's main force. The Vorthak scouts arrived like a swarm of mechanical insects, their bioships glistening with organic armor and bristling with weapon ports. They moved in perfect coordination, sharing thoughts and reactions through their hive-mind connection. To them, the small human force looked like prey trapped in open space. The battle began with a thunderous exchange of plasma fire. Human weapons carved bright lines across space, while Vorthak biocannons replied with pulses of acidic energy that ate through armor like fire through paper. The Valiant shuddered under enemy fire, her hull plates glowing red-hot from repeated impacts. "They're taking the bait," Commander Park reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "All Vorthak vessels are engaging. No signs they suspect deception." Sarah watched her people die with professional detachment and personal agony. Each explosion on the tactical display represented 30 human lives, friends and colleagues who had chosen sacrifice over surrender. The mathematics were brutal but necessary. 12 ships and 360 lives to preserve the surprise that might save 15 million civilians. The decoy battle raged for 27 minutes. Human ships fought with desperate courage, making the Vorthak pay for every meter of space. But the outcome was inevitable. One by one, the human vessels suffered critical damage, their hulls breached and systems failing. "This is Valiant Leader," Commander Park's voice was calm as death itself. "All ships, prepare for final protocol. It's been an honor serving with you all." The explosion was visible even from the asteroid field, a brief new star that flared and died in the darkness of space. 12 human ships and their crews vanished in nuclear fire, taking all 24 Vorthak scouts with them. The enemy advance force had been eliminated without sending a single message to their main fleet. Sarah closed her eyes, honoring the dead with a moment of silence. Then she opened them and got back to work. Commander Park and her people had bought them the time and concealment they needed. Now it was up to the rest of the fleet to make their sacrifice worthwhile. "All stations, prepare for the main engagement," she announced. "The Vorthak main force will arrive in 14 hours. They'll be expecting to find debris and wreckage from a standard fleet action. Instead, They're going to fly into the most carefully prepared ambush in human military history. The asteroid field was ready, packed with explosives and hidden human ships. The trap was set, the bait was prepared, and the enemy was coming. Everything depended on timing, courage, and the peculiar human ability to turn disadvantage into opportunity. But as Sarah looked at the tactical display showing 2,000 enemy contacts approaching their position, she felt a familiar surge of determination. Humanity had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and 100 different extinction events. They had clawed their way from caves to starships through sheer bloody-minded refusal to surrender. The Vorthak were about to learn why predators learned to fear humans, and why the galaxy's elder races had never quite figured out how to predict what humanity would do next. Because when humans were backed into a corner with nowhere to run, they didn't surrender. They bit back. The Vorthak main force arrived like a plague of locusts, 2,000 bioships flowing through space in perfect formation. Captain Sarah Chen watched from her hiding place deep within the asteroid field as the alien fleet approached the site of the decoy battle. Their vessels pulsed with organic light, living weapons bred for one purpose: consumption of all life they encountered. "They're scanning the debris field," reported Lieutenant Torres. "Biosensors are analyzing the wreckage from our sacrificial force." Sarah held her breath. Everything depended on the enemy believing they had destroyed humanity's main fleet in the earlier engagement. The Vorthak needed to think the threat was eliminated, that they could proceed to Kepler-7 without further resistance. The alien formation began to shift, individual ships spreading out to begin their survey of the battlefield. Their movements followed the predictable patterns of a hive mind, systematic, thorough, but lacking the creative unpredictability that characterized human tactics. "Captain," whispered Commander Morrison, "they're moving into the kill zone." Across the asteroid field, 35 human ships waited in absolute silence. Their crews had been practicing this moment for months, learning to think like hunters rather than soldiers. Every weapons officer had memorized their targeting solutions. Every engineer had their overload sequences ready. Every captain knew exactly when to fire and where to move. The Vorthak fleet flowed between the asteroids like water finding its level. They detected no immediate threats, no active weapon systems, no signs of human presence. Their biosensors read only cold rock and metal debris. The hive mind calculated minimal risk and ordered the fleet to proceed at maximum speed toward their ultimate target. They were wrong. Hidden within the largest asteroids, human engineers had spent days installing the most powerful mining charges ever created. Concealed behind sensor-dampening fields, 35 warships waited with their plasma cannons modified far beyond safe operational parameters. And scattered throughout the field, automated relay stations prepared to coordinate the most precisely timed ambush in military history. Sarah watched the tactical display as the last enemy ships entered the killing ground. 2,000 Vorthak vessels packed into a space designed for perhaps 200. Their own numbers had become a trap, making evasive maneuvers impossible and ensuring maximum casualties when the hammer finally fell. "All ships," she whispered into her communicator. "This is for Commander Park and every human who died getting us to this moment. Execute Operation Thunderbolt." The asteroid field exploded. Mining charges detonated simultaneously throughout the killing zone, shattering massive rocks into millions of high-velocity projectiles. The debris cloud expanded outward like a metallic hurricane, each fragment moving fast enough to penetrate Vorthak bioarmor. At the same moment, 35 human ships revealed themselves and fired their overloaded plasma cannons. The energy beams, pushed far beyond normal limits, created cascading reactions as they interacted with the charged debris field. Lightning arced between metal fragments, turning the entire space into a crackling web of destruction. The Vorthak fleet, caught in perfect formation with nowhere to run, began dying by the hundreds. Bioships exploded as metal fragments tore through their organic hulls. Others suffered catastrophic systems failures as plasma energy overloaded their neural networks. The hive mind, accustomed to perfect coordination, suddenly found itself dealing with massive sensory overload as thousands of individual ships reported damage simultaneously. But the enemy was not helpless. Even as hundreds of vessels died in the opening seconds, the surviving ships began to adapt. The hive mind compartmentalized the chaos, cutting off damaged units and redirecting healthy ships toward the human positions. "Enemy vessels breaking through the debris field," reported Morrison. "They're targeting our position clusters." Sarah had expected this. No plan survived contact with the enemy, and the Vorthak were learning to counter human tactics. But she had one more surprise prepared. "All ships, implement scatter pattern gamma, time for phase 2. The human vessels abandoned their fixed positions and began moving erratically through the asteroid field. Instead of fighting like a traditional fleet, they adopted hit-and-run tactics that took advantage of their superior maneuverability and intimate knowledge of the terrain. Small groups of ships would appear from behind asteroids, fire concentrated bursts at isolated enemy vessels, then disappear back into the maze of rock and metal. The Vorthak, designed for overwhelming frontal assaults, found themselves fighting ghosts that struck without warning and vanished before retaliation was possible. Commander Rebecca Hayes led her 3-ship squadron through a particularly dense cluster of asteroids, hunting for targets of opportunity. Her destroyer, Revenge, had lost most of its armor in the initial ambush, but remained operational. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, her tactical officer announced. "Single Vorthak cruiser appears to be damaged. Take us in. Remember, we hit fast and hard, then run before his friends arrive." The Revenge and her escorts dropped out of the asteroid shadows like predatory birds. Their plasma cannons spoke in unison, carving deep wounds in the enemy ship's biohull. The Vorthak vessel tried to return fire, but human ships were already accelerating away, using the asteroids as cover. Throughout the field, similar engagements played out as human crews fought with the desperate creativity of a species that had never learned to accept impossible odds. They used every trick accumulated through 50 years of spacefaring. Gravity assists around asteroids, sensor shadows, coordinated attacks from multiple vectors, and the simple willingness to take risks that more cautious species would never attempt. The battle raged for 6 hours. Slowly, inevitably, the Vorthak began to gain the upper hand through sheer numbers. For every alien ship destroyed, humans lost irreplaceable vessels and experienced crews. The mathematics were brutal but clear. Humanity was winning tactically but losing strategically. "Captain," Morrison's voice was grim, "we're down to 18 ships. The enemy still has over 700 operational vessels." Sarah studied the tactical display, watching red dots representing human ships wink out one by one. They had achieved far more than anyone had thought possible, destroying over 1,300 enemy ships in a single engagement. But it wasn't enough. "Communications, patch me through to the evacuation fleet." Admiral Fletcher's voice crackled over the channel. "Sarah, tell me you have good news." "The civilian evacuation is complete. All 15 million people are safely away from Kepler-7. She heard Fletcher release a long breath. "Then we've won what matters most. The mission is accomplished." "Not yet, Admiral. We still have 18 ships and some of the finest crews in the galaxy. That's enough to give the Vorthak something to remember us by." "Sarah, you've done enough. Your orders are to withdraw immediately." "Negative, Admiral. These people trusted us to protect them. We're going to make sure the enemy pays the full price for threatening human civilians." She cut the communication and turned to address her bridge crew. These young faces looked exhausted, bloodied but unbroken. They had followed her through hell itself and were prepared to go further if necessary. "Listen up," she announced over the ship-wide communication system. "The civilians are safe. Our mission is accomplished, but we have one more job to do. The Vorthak came here expecting an easy meal. Instead, they found humanity at its finest. Now we're going to teach them why predators fear humans. The remaining human ships began their final attack run. 18 vessels against 700, charging straight into the teeth of the enemy formation. They had abandoned subtlety and embraced the direct approach that had carried humanity from the caves to the stars. The Defiance led the charge, her hull scarred and weapons overheating, but her crew united in purpose. They struck the enemy center like a spear thrust, concentrating their fire on the largest Vorthak vessels. Human ships exploded under return fire, but they took alien vessels with them, trading lives for the chance to inflict maximum damage. When the smoke cleared, only 3 human ships remained operational. The Defiance was one of them. Her hull breached in 17 places, life support failing, but still fighting. "Captain," Torres reported quietly, "we're receiving a transmission. It's from the Elder Council." The ancient alien psychic voice filled the bridge, speaking directly into their minds with the authority of 10,000 years of galactic rule. "Human vessels, you will withdraw immediately. Your unauthorized action threatens the stability of our strategic planning." Sarah Chen, bleeding from a dozen wounds, her ship dying around her, looked up at the stars and smiled. "Elder Council," she replied, "with all due respect, humanity doesn't take orders from those who abandon innocent people to monsters. We've saved 15 million lives today and reminded the galaxy what courage looks like. Calculate that with your ancient computers." The psychic presence withdrew, but not before Sarah sensed something she had never felt from the elders before: uncertainty. The surviving human ships limped away from the asteroid field, leaving behind a graveyard of Vorthak vessels. The enemy had been shattered, their advance stopped, their aura of invincibility broken. Word would spread throughout the galaxy of the battle where 47 human ships had stood against 2,000 alien vessels and emerged victorious. The elders had calculated the odds and declared humanity's cause hopeless. They had recommended retreat, abandonment, the cold mathematics of acceptable losses. Instead, humanity had proven that some things couldn't be calculated: the value of courage, the power of sacrifice, and the absolute refusal to surrender when innocent lives hung in the balance. From that day forward, when the Elder Council made their pronouncements about military impossibility, species throughout the galaxy would remember the Battle of Meridian Asteroid Field. They would remember that humans had looked at impossible odds and charged anyway. And they would remember that sometimes, just sometimes, courage and determination could overcome any calculation, no matter how ancient or wise the minds that made them. The Vorthak swarm never again attempted a major offensive against human space, and when other threats emerged, the Elder Council found themselves asking a new question: what would the humans do? Because in a galaxy full of ancient wisdom and careful calculations, humanity had proven that sometimes the most important victories came from those brave enough to ignore the odds and fight for what was right.